Okay. On the true joy that which comes from philosophy. Do you suppose that I shall write you how kindly the winter season has dealt with this? A short season and a mild one? Or what a nasty spring we are having, cold weather out of season, and all the other trivialities which people write when they are at a loss for topics of conversation. No, I shall communicate something which may help both you and myself. And what shall this something be, if not an exhortation to soundness of mind? Do you ask, what is the foundation of a sound mind? It is not to find joy in useless things. I said that it was the foundation. It is really the pinnacle. We have reached the heights if we know what it is that we find joy in, and if we have not placed our happiness in the control of externals. The man who is goaded ahead by hope of anything, though it be within reach, though it be easy of access, and though his ambitions have never played him false, is troubled and unsure of himself. Above all, my dear Lucilius, make this your business. Learn how to feel joy. Do you think that I am now robbing you of many pleasures when I try to do away with the gifts of chance, when I counsel the avoidance of hope, the sweetest thing that gladdens our hearts? Quite the contrary. I do not wish you even to be deprived of gladness. I would have it born in your house, and it is born there, if only it be inside of you. Other objects of cheer do not fill a man's bosom. They merely smooth his brow and are inconstant. Unless perhaps you believe that he who laughs has joy. The very soul must be happy and confident, lifted above every circumstance. Real joy, believe me, is a stern matter. Can one, do you think, despise death with a carefree countenance, or with a blithe and gay expression, as our young dandies are accustomed to say? Or can one thus open his door to poverty, or hold the curb on his pleasure, or contemplate the endurance of pain? He who ponders these things in his heart is indeed full of joy, but it is not a cheerful joy. It is just this joy, however, of which I would have you become the owner, for it will never fail you once you have found its source. The yield of poor minds is on the surface. Those are really rich whose veins lurk deep, and they will make more bountiful returns to him who delves unceasingly. So too these baubles which delight the common crowd afford but a thin pleasure, laid on as a coating, and every joy that is only plated lacks a real basis. But the joy of which I speak, that to which I am endeavoring to lead you, is something solid, disclosing itself the more fully as you penetrate into it. Therefore, I pay you, my dear Lucilius, do the one thing that can render you really happy. Cast aside and trample underfoot all those things that glitter outwardly and are held out to you by another or are obtainable from another. Look toward the true gold and rejoice only in that which comes from your own store. And what do I mean by from your own store? I mean from your very self, that which is the best part of you. The frail body also, even though we can accomplish nothing without it, is to be regarded as necessary rather than as important. It involves us in vain pleasures, short-lived and soon to be regretted, which, unless they are reined in by extreme self-control, will be transformed into the opposite. This is what I mean. Pleasure, unless it has been kept within bounds, tends to rush headlong into the abyss of sorrow. But it is hard to keep within bounds in that which you believe to be good. The real good may be coveted with safety. You ask me what this real good is and whence it derives. I will tell you, it comes from a good conscience from honorable purpose, from right actions, from contempt of the gifts of chance, from an even and calm way of living, which treads but one path. For men who leap from one purpose to another, or do not even leap, but are carried over by a sort of hazard, how can such wavering and unstable person possess any good that is fixed and lasting? There are only a few who control themselves and their affairs by a guiding purpose. The rest do not proceed, they are merely swept along, like objects afloat in a river. And of these objects, some are held back by sluggish waters and are transported gently. Others are torn along by a more violent current. Some which are nearest the bank are left there as the current slackens, and others are carried out to sea by the onrush of the stream. Therefore, we should decide what we wish and abide by the decision. Now is the time for me to pay my debt. I can give you a saying of your friend Epicurus and thus clear this letter of its obligation. It is bothersome always to be beginning life. Or another, which will perhaps express the meaning better. They live ill who are always beginning to live. You are right in asking why. The saying certainly stands in need of a commentary. It is because the life of such person is always incomplete. But a man cannot stand prepared for the approach of death if he has just begun to live. We must make it our aim already to have lived long enough. No one deems that he has done so if he is just at the point of planning his life. You need not think that there are a few of this kind. Practically everyone is of such a stamp. Some men indeed only begin to live when it is time for them to leave off living. And if this seems surprising to you, I shall add that which will surprise you still more. Some men have left off living before they have begun. Farewell.
Evanik, may I take over the?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. If you could stop sharing.
Yep, doing that right now.
All right, folks. Evanik, we did a piece on death. Is that correct?
This one is.
No, but the first one, what was it that we read? So right?
This was the first one that we read. It's about.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I thought we read about.
We read it twice, so that's probably
twice. Okay,
it was read twice.
Wonderful. All right, folks, would love to hear what you think. This is going to be very interactive, so would love to hear your comments. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom if you would like to speak. We're going to start with Nalini. Nalini, go ahead.
Hi. It was not, it was very deep, like I guess the rest of the letters. But it talks a lot about joy. And according to what I understood, is that joy is something that should be constant. That means we should be able to access it or feel happy. When we talk about hope, hope is actually not true joy because that is kind of short-lived. It's a feeling that we have for just a short period of time. And another joy that is short-lived is also called pleasure. So those two, he talks about that they are not really true joy. And from what I understood is that the true joy should be something that should be felt from within. And it should be something that is lasting. And then he talks about the death. And of course, no, before that, I think I will just say a little bit more about the true joy. Um, it can be found from our thoughts, the way, or the perceptions, the way we see things, the way we listen to the people, the way we feel about them. And they want us to build self-reliance, for example, and we should, that's what true joy is. And then the last part of the letter, he talks about preparing for death, but we know that the Stoics always want to reflect upon death because they want us to treasure every minute that we have in our grasp. That's what I got from this letter.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Nalini. Would love to hear from as many of you making comments about this. There is the theme of true and false, inner and outer, death and fear of death versus actual living. So we're going to start with Oscar, followed by Elizabeth. Oscar, go ahead.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. All right, so what I got from the letter, my understanding is we should all try to find our passion, which is something that's within us. I would say something that we're our gift, so to speak. And that again, that's something that's within. Like for example, what happens nowadays is that most people get so caught up on materialistic things and working for getting a better car or better clothes, but of course that never fulfills you. So what the letter is trying to say is that it's the only thing that will fulfill you is your passion. And from what I understand is your passion tends to be of good service to others. So yes, that's my thought about that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Oscar. Folks would love to hear from as many people as possible. It's very interesting how Stoics look at this, because in a sense, they're focused on passion, but they're focused on passion which integrates with nature, and they're saying no to passions which are not integrated. So there is like a one level of criteria that they have sitting on the top of that. But next up is going to be Elizabeth, followed by Joy. Elizabeth.
Hi, Shrikant. I was going to build on something Nalini said. So, let me look at this again. So he said true joy can be accessed from within. And then I think it says something about like your thoughts and perceptions from what you tell yourself and what other people tell you. So I guess my question, it's more like a question. It's like, if everything is shaped by what other people tell you and that narrative you feed yourself, then the joy can't be accessed from within because it's being fed off society. And so if society has issues or if society is telling you wrong things, it's very hard to find that joy. So at least that's the way I see it.
Okay, what we'll do, excellent question, Elizabeth. So what we're going to do is that we will table all the questions, and everybody will come back to them, whenever anybody wants to come back to them. So what we're doing in this initial phase is we are putting things on the table that come to our mind. Okay, and then you can pick up on anything else that anybody else has said. So this is a very interesting question of what is it that comes from outside, from other people to you, and what is it comes from within, and what's the difference between them, and how do you distinguish between them? This is a very big theme among Stoics. I think one of the letters talks about if you're popular, then you have to watch out whether you're doing something right. So it's very, very interesting, this question, and Seneca deals with it in many of the letters. Next up is going to be Joy, followed by Penny. Wait a minute, Elizabeth, you wanted to add something. Go ahead.
That was it, Shrikant. I was just going to ask about that question, and like you said, we can table it, and if we have time, maybe we can come back to it.
Yeah, I mean, what we do in this, Elizabeth, the format that we have is that we're trying to really explore this letter. So we're going to start with everybody putting their thoughts on the table, their questions on the table, and then whenever it is appropriate, anybody can pick them up and go from there. So it is not, because otherwise, if one question is like a knife, it cuts in a particular direction. This one actually, there are so many knives in here, and so many angles, so many perspectives that Seneca has on so many things contained in this. So I want to put, everybody's take on the letter on the table so that we can discuss it. So that's why we postpone questions and let people bring them up as they see fit.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had, Shrikant.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Joy, followed by Penny. Joy.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite letters. And so I think, one takeaway was about like detachment from the external circumstances. So like wealth is one of the circumstances that definitely ordinarily affects the joy of a person, and other circumstances that are in the views of Seneca, like fortune. And so being indifferent to the whims of fortune is the main way to find joy. And so I think that's, very similar to what a lot of different philosophies teach about how to actually find that pure joy, and not relying on wealth or earthly pleasure, but really having that detachment. And then I think the other takeaway is about the people who possess a lot, but they don't possess themselves. And so how you can have a lot of material wealth or good fortune, but if you don't control yourself, if you can't control your feelings beyond that, then you don't really possess anything at all. And I think both are very salient points. And then the one I liked is about another thing I liked is about difficulty coming from a lack of confidence, and not a lack of confidence being a result of difficulty. And so that one's lack of confidence makes difficult things worse. And self-belief is really important in being able to withstand any difficulty that life might throw at you. And definitely relying on philosophy, as a way to be able to achieve joy, since it is based on these things. So instead of, and I think the last part of it, I was sort of pondering what he meant, but I think it's a lot of people wait to live their lives until fortune aligns with their vision of how their life should be. So they're always waiting for something to happen, and then they're like, okay, now I will live. And this idea that happens to a lot of people, but you can end up, ending your life still waiting to start your life. And so detaching yourself from the whims of fortune allows you to just start living right now, because your joy can start as soon as you're ready to feel it. So I think those are the main takeaways I had, and I agree with all of them.
Well, wonderful. Thank you, Joy. I mean, there are just incredible number of points. They have, the Stoics have fundamental things to say about possessions. They have fundamental things to say about how you can use difficulty to your advantage to build your character. They have, I mean, it's this part about waiting to live. I think that was it's just very cutting, really goes very deep. So there's just, each of these letters is such a treasure house of wisdom. So it's incredible. Next up is going to be Penny, followed by Connie. Penny.
Okay. To follow, I think, some of the theme that some have said, I mean, when he's looking at this, he's talking about a real joy. And he's kind of contrasting that, I would say, with happiness or pleasure, which he sees as fleeting and more outward. Joy comes from within, from your soul. And I would say that basically he's saying that there is a calm or a peace that you have with yourself. And if you have that calm and peace with yourself, then you are joyful no matter what the external circumstances. And he cautions about like not being attracted to anything that anybody else can give you or that are outward things, because these are not going to be a source of this true joy. And then I felt like when he was saying too about you should stick to the things that are good, that here he's kind of giving us to the source of what the joy is. And he's in section 7, it says, do you ask me what this real good is and whence it derives? I will tell you. It comes from a good conscience, from honorable purposes, for right actions, for contempt of the gifts of chance, from an even and calm way of living, which treads but one path. And at the end, I think that when he's bringing up death, he's basically saying, if you have joy and you feel like you are living your fullest, to your spiritual fullest, to your, satisfying your own self at every moment, then you are prepared to die at any moment because you are living to the fullest every moment of your life.
Wonderful, beautifully put. Thank you, Penny. That was great. Would love to hear anybody else. Go ahead, Connie.
I particularly like verse 8, if we call it verse. There are only a few who control themselves and their affairs by a guiding purpose. I just love guiding purpose. I have never thought of those words, and I wish I had when I was very young. I wish somehow in life, when we're young, and perhaps other people have had this, really know that this is what life really is. And the next part is the rest do not proceed. They are merely swept along like objects afloat in a river. That is probably one of the most powerful sentences I think I've ever read, and wish I had read it when I was much younger. Thank you.
Thank you. This question, I mean, I would love to have any more comments. I want to just highlight this point that Connie brought up, and then I think Joy also touched on it. It's a question of preparing to live. I love this particular letter because the way in which it separates death and life is really amazing. It just puts the focus directly, because people are saying, oh, I'm waiting to live. I'm waiting to live. And he's saying that, no, you're not, because when you say you're waiting to live, you're not living. And you are engaged in actually dying at that time. So it's really interesting how they use a whole set of techniques, the Stoics, in order to intensify the idea of what it means to live now. Because now is all you have. Firstly, they say, look, you might lose your life the next moment. So now is all you have. So, it just focuses your attention. Look, this is what I have. There, if you say, okay, I'm now afraid of what might happen to me, then you're saying, why are you throwing away the present moment for a fear of a possibility which may never happen? That is, again, that's not living. that is dying. So it's like the way in which the Stoics zero in on the very point that is open to us. It's dichotomy of control. And that's what you see. Dichotomy of control seems like a more abstract notion. But all these various themes of what is it that you can't control and what is it that you can control on one hand, okay? The second is what is externality and what is internal. The third is what is death and what is life. They all are parallel ways of thinking about the same core issue. And the Stoics relentlessly ask you to focus on that. And they use even death. They use death in a very creative way to show you the value and meaning of life and how to actually live now. So it is quite incredible. So Oscar, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Joe first because he has not had a chance to chime in on this. And then I will go to Oscar. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, so just briefly, and I'm assuming you're on 23, correct? I just got it. Which
I lost track of numbers, but
regardless, but let's
Yes.
just talk
Yeah,
about
we are on
number.
23.
But absolutely, the fear of death and how that prevents you from actually living in so many different ways, other than just the fear of death itself. It's when fear drives your decisions, and it drives you away from what we discuss here very often in the Gita, the center of who you are, your authentic self. So that the fear that you're maybe not going to be, I have quite a storm here. But we have that we're not going to be able to, be well received if we pursue what we think the right thing is to do. That's a fear that we have, and it manifests itself in many different ways, in ways of actually pursuing, pursuing professions, livelihoods that we wouldn't otherwise pursue. And it's this fear. And if you conquer your fear of death, and then you realize that, well, you can start to live, because it starts to, once you realize that you are going to die and you can overcome that fear, then you can start living. And it's a very, very powerful, way of thinking about just living. And it's, I often, in popular culture, it's very much captured in Steve Jobs' final speech at Stanford. He says, you're already naked. So the fear, the idea that I was going to die someday is actually, it was facing him in the directly at one point in time. He said, that realizing, overcoming that fear is allowed him to pursue what he thought was truly meaningful. And one of the exercises actually that Donald Robertson, who was actually spoken here in the past, in his course on Socrates, is to ask yourself, what would you do if you found out you had 30 days to live, 40 days to live, 50 days to live? And that ought to be, not that there's, that ought to be the types of things that you're pursuing. So I think that it's a very, very powerful way, and understanding that it takes a philosophical approach to life.
Thank you, Joe. You've inspired many people to come up with many thoughts. So really appreciate that. I have to read this. This is a litany of fear. This is my version of it. This is originally from Dune, but this is my version of it, modified version of it on fear. I must not fear fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death, which when feared brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me, under me, and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. So it's the same sentiment. I just love this. All right, we're going to go with Oscar, Connie, and Nalini. Oscar.
Yes, I wanted to touch on when the letter spoke about the waters, the flow. I think to me, what that reminds me of is following society, and you end up, being lost. I also think that when it touches on like those few men, if you notice, highly successful people they're very few, and they remain stern in what they believe in. It doesn't matter what people say about them, and as much as we may say something bad about them, we also, I would say, are jealous of them because they are living I would say, a life. Meaning, for me, life is growth, death is reduction. So another thing I also wanted to talk about was, I think those who fear death are those who haven't found their passion, or have many regrets in life of the wrongdoings, especially when it comes to relationships with people, not, I would say, like the type of job that they did. I would say just a relationship of people that they had. And so, yeah, so that was about it, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Oscar. Next up is going to be Connie, followed by Nalini. Connie.
Yes, I did choose this 23 as one of my favorites. So glad others have voted on it also. From 29, which is another one that I chose, I saw something very profound to me, which was most people don't fear death. They fear the thought of death. And I just was blown away and had to stay with that when I read it earlier, and never had seen it that way, and just found it brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Connie. It's a fear of fear. It's the fear of something. It's the expectation of death, not death itself. It's the expectation of death that actually leads to death in the moment.
If I could say, it's also the process after speaking to certain people, because there are some deaths that are better than others in terms of how we go out. Dying in your sleep is probably the most peaceful. Dying in a horrific car crash, that's the most horrific.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. So folks, if you want to talk, just go ahead and type an exclamation mark, and we'll go to everybody. Next up is going to be Nalini, followed by Joe. Nalini.
Hi. Oscar mentioned about the passion. And I was thinking, yes, if you have a passion, that does bring true happiness. I think for me, I do gardening and I do photography. And when I'm doing those two things, time is lost. I don't know how to do, I have tried, and I still try to do meditation, but my mind goes all over. But when I am doing the gardening, 4 hours can go by and I don't realize that. Each and every flower that I touch, or the petals that I see growing each day, it brings so much joy to see the beautiful colors. And just to touch them and hold them. And then, of course, I never really cut them to bring them inside. I just leave them there to enjoy. But I think for me, that is my meditation. And if you do have a passion, I think if there is fear of death because of an illness, and to me, it was like, it's a personal thing, but there was recently something happened, and I was told that maybe I have 30 days to live. And I was shocked and stunned, and for 3 days, I didn't know what to do. And then on the 4th day, I still remember, I said, I'm not going to stop my gardening that I do. And probably I will do the best gardening in my life that I could do, so that I can get joy from there. And I started the garden early, very early this year, which I usually do the first week of June, but I started, fortunately, the weather here in Chicago cooperated. But just to touch the dirt with my hands, I don't like to wear gloves. It's that touching that dirt, digging into it, planting the flowers. It kept me going. And I don't know if that's something that was meant, or it's just that I felt it that way from this letter when I read the fear of death and how to deal with it, how to cope with it with a passion, or a passion you have and the joy you get there, which is, I don't think you can compare it with anything.
Nalini, that was
Thank you.
that was beautiful. Thank you. Stoics are very deep into this kind of connection with nature, or something that is real, that comes from the bottom of your heart. The thing that they distinguish between is people, for example, trying to impress each other versus having a true passion. There is a true passion which comes from the center of your being. I love the quote by Isaac Asimov, and he wrote so many books. And somebody asked him, what would you do if you knew that you had only 30 days to live? So he says, I will write faster. But that is a sign of somebody who is really genuinely from the bottom of their heart loves what they do. Now that is one kind of a passion. The word passion is used in multiple ways. There is a second kind of passion which is there, which is a second-hand passion, that you actually do not value something. It's you want it because other people want it, or other people, you think that other people will think that you're cool if you have something. So you're trying to impress other people. And there, moment you start doing that, no matter how enthusiastic you are about it, you have lost the focus on your true being. You've gotten attached to externalities. And in the process, you have separated yourself from your life, which is in you, your consciousness, which is an independent consciousness communing with nature. So that is the distinction that they bring. But the kind of passion that you're talking about is exactly the kind of passion that Seneca is talking about, of having that. And what he's saying is that if you have that, then why are you doing something which is not that? Work only on those kinds of passions. Don't do things which bring you down, which bring you these little deaths. Live, instead. So thank you. That was beautiful. Let's see here. Joe is next. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually just going to just comment on what Nalini said and just briefly, and because I think it is of profound importance, is that when, yes, you're doing what you would normally do, and you're not necessarily, and you hear some news like Nalini had heard, it you're following your passion. And what does that allow you to do? It allows you to do whatever you are doing well. And I think that that's what you're, in a way, what you were saying, Nalini, is that, you know, you were going to do this even better than you normally do it, because, you know, you know, this may be the last time you have an opportunity to do it, but it didn't change you. And that's you know, that's an indication that, you know, you're following your true nature. And all too often we fall away from our true nature, and we not only manage ourselves to outcomes, we manage ourselves. We use them as principles. We use outcomes as possible principles. Like I have an external here that this is driving my life, and that's a very dangerous thing versus actually using true principles, which is taking what something like Stoicism, philosophy of life, and then applying it to whatever it is that you are doing. And so that allows you to do it well. So you're working from the inside. You have the principles, and then you apply it to what you're actually doing, and that's what you did in that particular instance. So that was beautiful.
Thank you, Joe. I want to add one thing here. Like, one of the things that Stoicism does is that what Seneca is saying is that don't wait till the last few days of your life to notice that life is precious. And what he's saying is that there are these Stoic exercises where, we just emphasize that, look, you might lose everything. So, and you might die. So that's a real possibility. And the exercises are focused on making that the fragility of life real to you. And the purpose of that is to actually live passionately. So it's just incredibly beautiful. Thank you. Next up is Peter. Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, I just kind of want to echo on what you just said, Shrikant, because I actually was recently, I think it was yesterday, I was on a meetup about a fiction book, but the book was all about what you just said. So talking about like coincidences, but it's, but I completely agree with what you're saying. But if I could just add on to, I guess what I'm saying is there's also a what's the term, like balance, I guess, to put it simply, everything in moderation. Because I have met people in my life, and including myself at one point, that tend to lean to the extreme end of a spectrum. And what I mean by that is, as soon as I realized that life is precious, that's a while ago, and I decided to actually just waste on money on things that I didn't really actually need, because I was convinced that I might just actually die way before the human life expectancy reached, which is in the 80s somewhere, right? And as a result, I was not doing well financially. So, and then what I'm trying to say is, obviously, just be careful. Don't go too extreme on either end of the spectrum. Enjoy life, but not to the point where it becomes unrealistic, to the point that becomes self-torture. And that's my philosophy.
Thank you, Peter. So let me present how Seneca deals with it. Okay, and it is very different. It is not the concept of balance. He has a way of dealing with it which is incredibly powerful. Okay, what he does is that, take wealth. He goes on and saying to you that, look, wealth is not what your end should be. It is externality. And you have to train yourself to lose all the wealth that you have. So, and he practices it in terms of saying, okay, I'm going to now travel with almost nothing and act as if I have nothing. I have very little food. I will go without food for some time, okay? And get used to the idea mentally not to have any wealth, okay? At the same time, he's one of the wealthiest men of his time. He does not give up the wealth. He actually frees himself from his wealth, which allows him to actually get much more wealth. It may seem like a contradiction, but it is not. Okay, it's a very deep point. It is kind of like Solomon asking God, God comes and, Solomon asks him, please give me only wisdom. Don't want anything else, just wisdom. And what God says to him? Because you asked for wisdom, you're going to get wisdom, but you're also, as a consequence, going to get wealth and kingdom and power and everything else. So it's a question of what is primary and what is secondary. And Seneca is really powerful in making that distinction. Best way I've heard it summarized is that for a wise man, wealth is his slave. For a fool, wealth is his master. So it is not about wealth versus not wealth, but it is about whether the wealth is your slave. That means a means to your being yourself internally, or is it your master, one that will shape your innards? That is the question. And Seneca, his philosophy and his life is a brilliant solution, very powerful solution to this problem. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Evanique. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is essential, especially when we're talking about, and you kind of beat me to the punch. I was just going to say, what is wisdom then, right? And the idea of wisdom isn't about balancing anything. It's about finding your true self. It's the pursuit of virtue that results in happiness. So that's the basic of Stoicism, is that, and the externals may or may not come along with that. They're indifferent to a Stoic. So that is the one distinction between Stoicism and many other philosophies of life, is how they treat externals. So they're indifferent to them. They may come along with them. Seneca was wealthy. It may be there, but it may not. But either way, you're actually the real principle is the idea of having the wisdom to know who you are and actually pursue what you think to be right and just. And then this is, as you mentioned, it's secondary. Everything else becomes secondary. So when you talk about these goals, it's very important to have this concept down, because the reality is why a Stoic acts the way they do is based on virtue. And that's what Seneca is essentially saying. It's not based on pleasure. So the idea that you would be doing a risk analysis per se has really not a lot to do with virtue. Not to say that we ought not live balanced lives and do things that maybe that we don't necessarily want to do, but that is part of temperance and maybe exercising, things like that. I'm just using examples now on a practical level. But the reality is it's got to be in pursuit of something bigger. And that's what Seneca is saying here with, especially on number 6. But anyway, number part 6 of number 23. Anyway, I'll talk to that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is going to be Evanique, and then we will move to letter 22. Evanique.
Yeah, one of the things I'm hearing from what everybody's saying, and the participation tonight is, live the life that you want to live as you, as the person. And I think Nalini brought it best, and thank you, Nalini, for sharing that, because I think it really did help. When the doctor told Nalini that she has 30 days, she took the time to grieve that, right? And she was, you were sitting there, you were stunned, as anybody would be, and you had that reaction, and then you decided you were going to do what you always do because that was your passion. That's where you could lose yourself, is in gardening. And I think on a deeper level, it was, you were cultivating life, even when you were told that you had a limited time. You were cultivating life because that's your passion, right? And that's what you do. So I think the call here for all of us is to live our passion and to live our life. And if we don't know what that is, to find out. And I think letting go of externals, letting go of what people will think, letting go of what people will say to you, and living the life that you want to is the most fulfilling, no matter if you have wealth or not. I love what you said, Shrikant, about, for the wise man, wealth is his slave. For the foolish man, wealth is his master. And it talks about it in so many different works. The love of money is, the root of all evil. Money being, like it talks about it in the Bible too, money being your master, right? So I think when we look at it, and reading through all these letters from 21 to 30 in particular, it's a theme that we don't know when our day is coming. You can think about it and be afraid of it, or you can just live your life. And I think that's the theme: live your life, and live it, and live it because that's what you want to live, not because you have a limited amount of time. And sorry, Nalini, I keep coming back to you, but I think because you do what you did what you were always doing because you loved it. You were gardening because you loved it, and you had been doing it before you found out, and you were going to continue to do it because that's what you loved. And I think that's what's so special about you. You were doing what you love. And I've known you for a short time, but that's the one thing I always got from you, is that you were full of love. And you've always been full of love, of not just gardening, of people. And so I think that's like one of your most beautiful attributes, is your ability to love. So I think that's the theme here, is live the life that you want to live. And then you will have everything else. Everything else will come.
Thank you, Evanique. And I really, I'm just honored that Nalini has chosen to be here. She was here before and she is here now. So I really like the fact that it's just wonderful to have. I'm just tremendously honored. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I will say one more thing after what you said, Evanique, if I may. I think there might be other people waiting. The other thing that I did was I take lots of pictures, photographs, because I love that. And within those, the first month, I went through all pictures, and I have a granddaughter who is 6 years old. And I had taken her pictures after she was born. I was there for about 20 days. They have seen the pictures, but I never put anything together. So I spent endless hours putting a photo album for her. I thought if something happened to me, she will have those pictures taken by me with a camera, which was the most precious camera for my husband. And that was such a fulfilling thing for me that I was able to do that. And I think even someone telling you that you have 30 days or 3 months or 6 months, I, at least at that time, thought it was still much, much better than I knew, because you don't know what's going to happen to you. So I still had that time to, and I thought I was really lucky that I had that time if I, lived only that long. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Thank you, Nalini. Thank you. Next up is going to be Elizabeth, and then we'll go to the letter 22.
Okay, sorry, Shrikant. This will be really quick. I know we have to move to the next letter. I was just going to say, comment on what you read about wealth recently. I guess, the problem I have with reconciling that in my mind is it's completely opposite of corporate culture in America. It's like, in any company, if you go to any company quarterly meeting, they're just talking about revenue, right? And if we don't meet our goals, something is very wrong. So, I don't know how to reconcile it. Maybe I can think of it this way. Maybe I can give the impression that I'm not worried about wealth, that that's not the ultimate goal. But not, just give the impression that way, but not, I guess I would have to focus on it, right? Because that's just the way capitalistic society is in America. So I'm just trying to figure out, like, first of all, do I know any examples of somebody who does this, like in real life? Okay. I can't think of anyone who's doing what Seneca did. Maybe they gave the impression that they weren't worried about wealth, but they were actually. Maybe that's the only thing I can think of. But that's just something, these are just my thoughts, so don't mind me.
Shrikant,
You're
you're
muted.
muted.
You're muted. You're muted.
Sorry about that. So thank you, Elizabeth. What I will say is this, that corporate America is not uniform, and corporate America is not a flow of business. Corporate America is most corporations were started by people who are very different than the people who run it, and most of the people in it. The people who start, like Steve Jobs, you can listen to them. There is this famous address by Steve Jobs. And that is actually true of innumerable people who actually start things. And there you see the passion, you see the love, you see that as being a primary thing that actually builds something. And then a whole bunch of other people come in who have a very different mentality. So it's a question of form and function. Those who are focused on function create living forms, which actually generates the wealth. And then a whole bunch of people get focused on forms, and they are trying to do things with forms. So wealth is the result of the function. And then people are trying to do something with the wealth itself without going back to function. So it's a very deep issue of how societies are built, and but by what I'm saying is that it's by no means monolithic, and people just forget where these corporations come from. It's the same thing. You can see it in a family between people who are self-made, rich, who know the value of what it means to be rich, and they actually deal with their wealth that way. And then there are children who inherit it, who never actually learned what actually takes to make it. And they're very, very different kind of people, and their attitude is different. So there are people who actually created the wealth in one generation are the people for whom the wealth was their servant. And the people who came afterwards, they took the wealth, they say goods are here, wealth is here. And then the moment you say that, it becomes your master. So that's how I understand it. Next up is going to be Joy, followed by Joe. Joy.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and something I've really pondered. And I think there's actually a lot of businesses that do focus on not focusing on revenues and assuming that if you don't focus on like short-term profits or even medium-term profits, that you'll actually be more successful. And so some examples are like Apple, that really focused on long-term success and not short-term profits, and the assumption that the quality of the product itself would eventually drive revenue. So not looking at the numbers, looking at actually producing that quality. And same with like Amazon, so like focusing on the customer obsession and not focusing on immediate revenue, and assuming that if you focus on that value, then revenues will grow. And then all the companies that focus on social responsibility or ethical ways, like Tom's Shoes, that focuses on sustainable products and things like that. So I think there is actually some businesses, or a lot of businesses or business people, that think that the excess focus or any particular focus on revenues or numbers can actually confuse the process of getting those revenues and numbers, and instead focus on the product, and that will lead to it. And I think it's like sort of like a detachment from things. And I think even like on an individual level, sometimes it depends on one's industry, but sometimes you are advised to detach from like the end goal and focus on like the process. So like if you're a salesperson and you're focusing on commissions, you can do that. You can focus on each day, like how much are you moving towards that number. But then others will say, actually focus on enjoying being a salesperson and the process, actually enjoying that process and not on the actual final numbers.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Very quickly, I'm just going to be, there's a corporation actually that was out here that was started, just points to what you're saying, we can't paint anything with a broad brush. There was in the beginning of the company, they actually had the lowest employees actually parked closest to the doors and to the building. And the senior executives actually parked furthest away. And then the senior executives eventually retired and had moved on, and the company had become very successful, and the management had turned over. And then all of a sudden, the CEOs of the company were actually parking near the building as opposed to the employees. And the values of the company itself had changed. And what happened is actually the company started to fail because it started to lose sight of the mission overall, what they were actually even producing. So when the values change, that's when it actually falls apart. But it's not monolithic. So
thank you, Joe. All right, let's go to number 22. Evanik, if you have it set up, can you go ahead and share the screen? And who would like to read? Go ahead and type a R if you would like to read. Would love to have new readers. So if you're not read before, please, I'll give you preference. Go ahead and type a R while Evanik is sharing.
Was 22 voted as one of the top?
Is that
Sure.
Yes,
okay?
So just a quick explanation. Some people came in late and they voted, so their votes were tallied in. So after that happened, 22 and 30 also got to 4 votes.
Excellent.
Wonderful.
Next up is going to be Joe. Go ahead, if you could read.
You understand by this time that you must withdraw yourself from those showy and depraved pursuits, but you still wish to know how this may be accomplished. There are certain things which can be pointed out only by someone who is present. The physician cannot prescribe by letter the proper time for eating or bathing. He must feel the pulse. There is an old adage about gladiators that they plan their fight in the ring as they intently watch something in the adversary's glance, some movement of his hand, even some slight bending of his body gives a warning. We can formulate general rules and commit them to writing. As to what is usually done or ought to be done, such advice may be given not only to our absent friends, but also to succeeding generations. In regard, however, to that second question, when or how you plan is to be carried out, no one will advise at long range. We must take counsel in the presence of the actual situation. You must be not only present in the body, but watchful in mind. If you would avail yourself of the fleeting opportunity, accordingly, look about you for the opportunity. If you see it, grasp it. And with all your energy and with all your strength, devote yourself to this task to rid yourself of those business duties. Now listen carefully to the opinion which I shall offer. It is my opinion that you should withdraw either from that kind of existence or else from existence altogether. But I likewise maintain that you should take a gentle path, that you may loosen rather than cut the knot with you have bungled so badly in tying. Provide that if there shall be no other way of loosening it, you may actually cut it. No man is so faint-hearted that he would rather hang in suspense forever than drop once for all. Meanwhile, and this is of first importance, do not hamper yourself. Be content with the business into which you have lowered yourself, or, as you prefer to have people think, have tumbled. There is no reason why you should be struggling on to something further. If you do, you will lose all grounds of excuse, and men will see that it was not a tumble. The usual explanation which men offer is wrong. I was compelled to do it. Suppose it was against my will, I had to do it. But no one is compelled to pursue prosperity at top speed. It means something to call a halt, even if one does not offer resistance, instead of pressing eagerly after favoring fortune. Shall you then be put out with me if I not only come to advise you, but also call in others to advise you? Wiser heads than my own, men before I am wont to lay any problem upon which I am pondering. Read the letter of Epicurus, which bears on this matter. It is addressed to Idomeneus. The writer asks him to hasten as fast as he can and beat a retreat before some stronger influence comes between and takes him from the liberty to withdraw. But he also adds that one should attempt nothing except at the time when it can be attempted suitably and seasonably. Then, when the long sought occasion comes, let him be up and doing. Epicurus forbids us to doze when we are meditating escape. He bids us hope for a safe release from even the hardest trials, provided that we are not in too great a hurry before the time, nor too dilatory when the time arrives. Now, I suppose you are looking for a Stoic motto also. There is really no reason why anyone should slander that school to you on the ground of its rashness. As a matter of fact, Its caution is greater than its courage. You are perhaps expecting the sect to utter such words as these. It is base to flinch under a burden, wrestle with the duties which you have once undertaken. No man is brave and earnest if he avoids danger, if his spirit does not grow with the very difficulty of his task. Words like these will indeed be spoken to you. If only your perseverance shall have an object that is worthwhile, if only you will not have to do or suffer anything unworthy of a good man. Besides, a good man will not waste himself upon mean and discreditable work, or be busy merely for the sake of being busy. Neither will he, as you imagine, become so involved in ambitious schemes that he will have continually to endure the ebb and flow. Nay, when he sees the dangers, uncertainties, and hazards in which he was formerly tossed about, he will withdraw, not turning his back to the foe, but falling back little by little to a safe position. From business, however, my dear Lucilius, it is easy to escape if only you will despise the rewards of business. We are held back and kept from escaping by thoughts like these. What then shall I leave behind me when these great what shall I leave behind me these great prospects? Shall I depart at the very time of harvest? Shall I have no slaves at my side? No routine routine for my litter. No crowd in my reception room. Hence, men leave such advantages of these with reluctance. They leave the reward of their hardships, but curse the hardships themselves. Men complain about their ambitions as they complain about their mistresses. In other words, if you penetrate their real feelings, you will find not hatred, but bickering. Search in minds of those who cry down and with what they have desired, who talk about escaping from things which they are unable to do without. You will comprehend that they are lingering of their own free will in a situation which they declare they find it hard and wretched to endure. It is so, my dear Lucilius. There are a few men whom slavery holds fast, but there are many more who hold fast to slavery. If, however, you intend to be rid of this slavery, if freedom is genuinely pleasing in your eyes, and if you seek counsel for this one purpose, that you may have the good fortune to accomplish this purpose without perpetual annoyance. How can the whole company of Stoic thinkers fail to approve your course? Zeno, Chrysippus, and all their kind will give you advice that this is temperate, honorable, and suitable. But if you keep turning around and looking about in order to see how much you may carry away with you, and how much money you may keep to equip yourself for the life of leisure, you will never find a way out. No man can swim ashore and take his baggage with him, rise to a higher life with the favor of the gods. But let it not be favor of such kind as the gods give to men when with kind and genial faces they bestow magnificent ills, justified in so doing by the one fact that the things which irritate and torture have been bestowed in answer to prayer. I was just putting a seal upon this letter, but it must be broken again in order that it may go to you with its customary contribution, bearing with it some noble word. And though here is one that occurs to mind, I do not know whether its truth or its nobility utterance is the greater? Spoken by whom, you ask? By Epicurus? For I am still appropriating all other men's belongings. The words are, everyone goes out of life just as if he had but lately entered it. Take anyone off his guard, young, old, or middle age. You will find that all are equally afraid of death and equally ignorant of life. No one has anything finished because we have kept putting off into the future all our undertakings. No thought in the quotation given above pleases me more than that it taunts old men with being infants. No one, he says, leaves this world in a different manner from one who has just been born. That is not true, for we are worse when we die than when we were born. But it is our fault, and not that of nature. Nature should scold us, saying, "What does this mean? I brought you into the world without desires, fear, or fears, free from superstition, treachery, and other curses. Go forth as you were when you entered." A man is called a message of wisdom if he can die as free from care as he was at birth, but as it is, we are all aflutter at the approach of the dreaded end. Our courage fails us, or our cheeks blanch. Our tears fall, though they were unraveling. But what is baser than to fret at the very threshold of peace? The reason, however, is that we are stripped of all our goods. We have jettisoned our cargo of life and are in distress. For no part of it has been packed in the hold. It has been heaved overboard and has drifted away. Men do not care nobly they live, but only how long, although it is within reach of every man to live nobly, but within no man's power to live long. Farewell.
Thank you very much, Joe. Folks, would love to hear your thoughts on this. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you'd like to comment. Would like to hear comments from as many people as possible. Please go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you'd like to comment. All right. Was it too long for you? Go ahead, folks. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark.
Shrikant, I think this happened the last time, and when we read it again, I think it helped.
It helped? Okay, let's do one thing. Let's just read the last couple of paragraphs. Because I thought that was it's a good part. Does anybody want to say anything? I want to give one more chance here. Okay, let's go ahead and read the last couple of paragraphs. So can you bring it up and let me go ahead and read. Let's see here. So this is the last one. Go one paragraph up. Okay, let's do this final seal, because this is very powerful. So let's just read this. I was just putting the seal upon this letter, but it must be broken again, in order that it may go to you with its customary contribution, bearing with it some noble word. And lo, here is one that occurs to my mind. I do not know whether its truth or its nobility of utterance is the greater. Spoken by whom, you ask? By Epicurus. for I'm still appropriating other man's belongings. The words are, everyone goes out of life just as if he had but lately entered it. Everyone goes out of life just as if he had but lately entered it. Take anyone off his guard, young, old, or middle-aged. You will find that all are equally afraid of death and equally ignorant of life. No one has anything finished because we have kept putting off into the future all our undertakings. No thought in the quotation given above pleases me more than it taunts old men with being infants. No one, he says, leaves this world in a different manner from one who has just been born. That is not true, for we are worse when we die than when we were born. It is our fault and not that of nature. Nature should scold us, saying, what does this mean? I brought you into this world without desires or fears, free from superstition, treachery, and the other curses. Go forth as you were when you entered. A man has caught the message of wisdom. If he can die as free from care as he was at birth. But as it is, we are all aflutter at the approach of the dreaded end. Our courage fails us. Our cheeks blanch. Our tears fall, though they are unavailing. But what is baser than to fret at the very threshold of peace? The reason, however, is that we are stripped of all our goods. We have jettisoned our cargo of life and are in distress, for no part of it has been packed in the hold. It has all been heaved overboard and has drifted away. Men do not care how nobly they live, but only how long. Although it is within the reach of every man to live nobly, but within no man's power to live long. Farewell. All right, folks, go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you'd like to comment on any part of this letter, including this last part. We're going to start with Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, number 8 is actually the one that when I was going through it kind of stuck with me, is that words like these indeed spoken to you, if only your perseverance shall have an object that is worthwhile, if only you will not have to do or to suffer anything unworthy of a good man. Besides, a good man will not waste himself upon mean and discreditable work, or be busy merely for the sake of being busy. This is kind of in a sense that just being, kind of pursuing what is most meaningful is actually not just doing because for no apparent reason, which is sometimes people do, is that they'll just go out and do things without any kind of intention, including consume things. And that's kind of where it gets, Seneca also talks about leisure time as well, and how time often is wasted in that. Also, this is essentially reading, I think that last line again actually was also meaningful in the sense that essentially it's within reach of every man to live nobly, but within no man's power to live long. And this kind of gets to some of his other writings about the shortness of life. And what is actually, in other words, the time that you have, that you're making the most of the pursuits that you have, or that you're making the most of your time that you have here, as opposed to trying to prolong your life for and only pursue things that are no longer meaningful. Like just make every day count is really kind of the I think the one of the main things. And it's about being kind of dedicated to living every day to its fullest in that regard.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is Evanique.
Yeah, what I got when we read the the final two paragraphs is two themes for me is don't procrastinate and freedom. And I think what I got from don't procrastinate is, we wait so long to live the life that we want to live. When this happens, when that happens, when the time is right, we give ourselves all these things. We never really take the action as if we have all the time in the world. And we take for granted that we don't. And we take for granted that even if we live to 100, it's not long in the history of this world, right? I mean, but still, you could go over half of your life and not live your life that you wanted to live and that you were striving to live. And a lot of times it's just because you're afraid and you let that fear take hold. And one of those fears is the fear of death, right? Death itself, which if you think about it, is kind of like a little death every day. You're just merely surviving. You're not living. It was a saying once. I read a saying once that said, "You only die once. You live every day." But you're living at that fear of that one-time event that keeps you from living your life. This one wild and precious life that we get. We're preventing ourselves really from living that life. We're allowing externals to dictate how we exist, really. So that was one thing. And when they talk about you're worse off that when you went to the grave that when you came into the world, because when you come into the world, you don't have those desires. You don't have, you don't have these externals, making you happy or not happy. You're just existing and you're just, you're free to be who you are. And it's up until someone tells you that you can't do something, probably your parents for your own safety, that way they can keep you alive. But then eventually, as you get older, people will tell you all the time, you can't do this, you're bad at this. Why do you want to pursue this? You're not very good at it. Live the life. We were talking about earlier in the evening, this corporate mentality of making money and how companies started and how they ended up as large as they got. And Joe was right when he said it's because they lose the values. I don't think we even lose them. We just allow other people to give us their values. So we wind up valuing what they value until we realize we didn't ask for that. So I think the key theme here is to keep the values that feel right for you. And, to really just take each day as a new day and another day that you get to live the life you want and to live a life that you love.
Wonderful. Thank you, Evanique. So this point about, I liked your point about you die only once and you live every day. And the sad thing is that when you fear death, you're fearing death all the time. So you basically, in the process, you're dying all day and you never live, because that's that fear is going to dominate, your existence. I particularly like this complaint of nature. It says nature should scold us, saying, what does this mean? I brought you into this world without desires. Okay, so this is a very large part, kind of removing desires, which are taking you away from things, or fears, free from superstition. So you're full of superstitions, treachery. We are betraying ourselves, and other curses. Go forth as you were when you entered. So what he's saying is that we go downhill. We stop, we even lose. Instead of gaining, we actually go down. So this is beautiful. Next up is going to be Joy. Joy.
Oh yes, yeah. I think 2 points that really stood out for me. One of them was like the first point regarding sort of stay ready, and that you can plan and know how you'll act in a certain situation, but it's only when you're in that situation that you really can act. And so I think that that's a great sort of advice or metaphor, sort of state like prepare yourself for situations, but understand like in the moment you'll have to act for that particular instance. And the metaphor of someone planning their actions in the ring during a fight, and how you can know what you may do, but it's definitely going to change based on what the other person does. And then I think the final point, also the idea that someone at the end of life is similar to someone at the beginning of life. I wasn't sure if he meant it's similar to how it is at the beginning of life, or it should be similar to how it is at the beginning of life. But if it's the second, that it should be the idea that you come into this world and you leave this world, you should think of them as sort of equal things, because what happens in between, the way I read it is that what happens in between is just like society or fortune or what so happens to occupy your attention. But ultimately, you at the beginning and you at the end you're in the exact same state of things sort of not being meaningful. So that's how it made me ponder in that way, that when you come into the world, you don't have any meaning for what your life is. You learn that meaning through society or what you go through on the day-to-day basis, but there's none when you come in. So when you leave, you should have a similar perspective on things, that you lived your life, but it's nothing beyond the fortunes. And so sort of having that sort of detachment about things as well.
Thank you, Joy. The way I understood that, because he deliberately put people young, not just says just born, young, middle-aged, and old. So what he's actually pointing to is something far more profound, because he's saying this is the human condition. This is the human condition, that all of us are afraid of death, and we have all of this stuff going on which stops us from living. And this is true regardless of our age. So we do not focus, while we are kind of afraid to lose the externalities. And in the process, we don't develop, our inner core. That's what he's pointing to. This is kind of given everything else that he has said as best as I understand it. Next up is going to be Penny, followed by Joe. Penny.
Okay, I just wanted to comment a little on what I think about, like the title on the futility of halfway measures. And around like section 11, I think he's saying, search the minds of those who cry down what they have desired, who talk about escaping from things which they are unable to do without. You will comprehend that they are lingering of their own free will in a situation which they declare they find it hard and wretched to endure. It is so, my dear Lucilius, there are a few men whom slavery holds fast, but there are many more who hold fast to slavery. And I see this as kind of directly the halfway measure that, people are commenting that, there are things they don't like, they want to change things. Oh, and this is undurable, but really, they don't want to change it. They like where they are. There are things about the situation that they don't like, but overall, that's what they want. And I think he's almost pointing out to his friend too, because he says that he wants to, get away from his business interests. And in other letters, it seems like he's got political things, lots of things going on that tie him to a lot of people. And he's like, well, I want to get away from this. But at the same time, it's like he really doesn't want to, because he's always like, well, I have to find the best time to do it, and then I'll do it. And if he says, like, if you're looking for the best time, you're never going to get away. There's never going to be a time that's ideal. You have to actually decide really what you want, and that the other thing is what you want. And so you have to stop basically now. You can't look for an ideal time, or you'll never change what you're doing. And that's what I think that they're saying a lot about the people at the end too. If you don't reach that point where you really try to live life, you're never going to live it.
Wonderful, Penny. I really like that quote. I'm glad that you picked up on that quote, that actually very few people are enslaved by slavery, whereas lots of us actually choose slavery. It's the same point about attachment that Gita talks about, attachment to the periphery. And it is coming from, you choose it. It's like you're turning your back on yourself and you're saying, no, that's what I want. That's what I want. And now you may complain, in your words with anything. And you say, oh, you know what? I really don't want it. I really don't like it. But you can see the actions of people which are clearly for that. So that was brilliant. Thank you. Folks, if you have any comments, please go ahead and make them. Next up is going to be Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I was actually going to comment on number 10 as well, but I thought that number 12 was also worth commenting on as well. When essentially it's about rise to a higher life with the favor of the gods, but let it not be favor of such kind as the gods give to men, when with kind and genial faces they bestow magnificent ills, justified in so doing by the one fact that things which irritate and torture have been bestowed in answer to prayer. The idea of like rising to this higher life, what that actually means. Rising to this higher life is getting back to actually what number 10, what Penny was talking about, is essentially not being attached to things, and being able to embrace fully what it means to live a virtuous life. And that means not being attached to externals in this particular instance. And actually, if you even go back to the previous line, Stoic thinkers failed to approve your course, and Chrysippus are all their kind will give you advice that it is temperate, honorable, and suitable. What is temperate, what is honorable, what is suitable? It's wisdom and knowing what is actually right to pursue, but it's also practicing temperance, and in that process, which is actually just a form of wisdom. And so it's about fully giving yourself to a philosophy of life, and to specifically in this case Stoicism. So I think it's about just going through all the things, the rewards that businesses give you, all these other things. It's just making sure that, hey, this is what it means to really live the philosophy of life, not necessarily just go halfway. And a lot of people do go halfway, or they have calculated ways of looking at things as opposed to pursuing, living the philosophy they've chosen.
Thank you, Joe. So folks, I want to now get your feedback on how we're doing with Stoicism and Seneca. This is the third meetup on Stoicism, and we are going back to Stoicism after quite a while. Joe, if you could put in chat the YouTube playlist that we have for Stoicism, would appreciate that, and would like to get, Ebony, would you like to comment on this particular verse, or Seneca and Stoicism in general?
Seneca and Stoicism in general.
So then, wonderful. So folks, so let me do a little bit more introduction. And then folks, I want to hear what you think about Stoicism and about Seneca, and what you're learning from these works. We've spent time studying, if you look back at 52 Living Ideas, we're doing many kinds of meetups. We're doing about, I think, 8 meetups per week. And over time, we've kept on changing many things. But if you look at one of the spines of what we have done over the past 1.5 years, is this parallel reading of the Chinese text, Indian text, and the Bible. And we're trying to see the commonalities between that. And I did this Seneca just as one-off, and I realized that he is contemporary of these works. And he is actually dealing with the same issues in a very similar way. The issue of eternal versus ephemeral, inner and outer, universal and contingent. So all the issues in their own way, what is the locus of choice that you have? How do you deal with others versus yourself? I mean, these are just very large issues. And Seneca also, like these other 3 works, looks at them in an integrated way, which is very foreign to the modern mind, which tends to be analytical. So I think that, Seneca is a very crucial addition. In some ways, he's closer to the modern world because he speaks in explicit terms of philosophy. He's based on the Greeks, but has the practicality of a Roman. So he shows a level of integration with practical things, which is way up there as far as philosophers go, puts him in the top probably 1% or 5% of philosophers. And he's very deep in thinking. I don't think there is, you definitely can stand up to the best of them at the level of depth of his conceptions. So quite an incredible person. So would love to hear what you think, of these meetups, because I'm planning to go through these entire letters. So please go ahead and type ! This is the time to give us feedback on how we're doing. If you have any comment about the format that we are using, you're welcome to do that as well. Would love to hear from as many of you as possible. We'll start with Ebony, followed by Joe. Ebony.
Yeah, I think this is the first, well, I don't want to say the first Stoicism meetup I've participated in 52 Living Ideas, but it's the first kind of like series. And I really like that we're going back because I missed the first time you guys studied it. I wasn't a part of the group then, so it's cool that we're doing it again. I think and there's so many Stoic philosophers that I think doing it this way with one particular philosopher, one particular set of letters is a great way to go deeper. And I think this, I think studying these letters has really added some practicality to Stoicism. I mean, not to say that it wasn't practical, it was, and it is, but I think studying these letters and hearing different people's thoughts and different people's perspectives, and this goes to the format, really works well in that we all can sit here and really study this together and get different thoughts on it. And just getting different perspectives and giving practical ways to apply this to our everyday life. So I've really gotten a lot out of it. The last two meetups, I did miss the first one. But with the second and the third one, the one on Wednesday and the one today is really, I've gotten so much out of it. And so I'm going to go back and look at the first one as well as the playlist that Joe posted. So I think this is great. And I think, this has been an amazing time.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Ebony. And, Joe is far more steeped into Stoicism than I am. And Joe was the one who, I chose Seneca because I think in terms of this marriage of deep universal principles and intense practicality, I think Seneca is just way up there on even amongst the Stoics that I have read, as best as I can tell. It is not like he's not like giving a prescription. I was talking to my friend Chase, who's also very deep into Stoicism, and he was saying that he's for him also Seneca is his favorite because Epictetus tends to be prescriptive. Marcus Aurelius is almost like he's an emperor, so it's a very different perspective. But Seneca is in the rough and tumble of merchant. He's a rough and tumble merchant, doing deals and going about his life and having this philosophy which completely integrates with his life. So that's why I've chose Seneca. But then I asked Joe about what his recommendations were, and this is what he chose. And I'm really glad because I think I really like these particular letters because firstly, they are short. Secondly, it shows you the entire range of his ideas in a very short letter. And he brings in themes from all of Stoicism. So he's not trying to give you like a short take. And I also like the format that he's talking to his friend. And he's giving advice to his friend. Obviously, he has a lot of respect for his friend as well. So I thought that this was a great choice of Seneca, and that's really all credit of Joe. So now we'll go to Joe, followed by Oscar. I would love to hear from as many people as possible, but go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I think that this is actually an important series to incorporate like kind of this, the Hellenistic philosophy and specifically Stoicism, and how it's obviously it holds, virtue is the only true good and that it's sufficient for a flourishing life. That how that relates to some of the other texts that we're covering, the religious texts. And I think that's why it's so important to cover Seneca in particular. He's a profound writer, but Stoicism actually complements a lot of the other things that we're doing here. And I think it provides us with other practical approaches as well. I mean, we talked a little bit about, kind of detachment, but these are the actual steps of detachment that, jobs, things that we do, not wasting our time. There's the idea of busyness, just being busy for busyness sake. These are very practical applications of that at a high level. The other texts, the other virtue ethics that we've covered, whether it be the Gita, the Gospel of John, or the Tao, has in so many ways said these same things, and having this on a very practical level and accessible level is very important. Conquering our fears of death. You know, the fear, how it can be paralyzing. He writes continuously about that, and as well as old age. It helps us have an appreciation as to what it means to grow older, to be wiser, as well as to be respectful of those who've gone before us. And I think that that's a very important idea, because sometimes we tend to disrespect ideas of the past, and it's important to have an understanding that that there was wisdom and is wisdom, and a lot of different ideas. So one of the other things that I like about the letters in particular is that it does incorporate philosophers like Epicurus into the writings in particular, which is interesting in and of itself, because it says that you can kind of take from these other philosophies. Now, is an approach for Stoicism, as we have noted this evening, specifically that you're pursuing virtue, not necessarily pursuing pleasure. But there are things that we can draw from Epicurus that we can incorporate into a philosophy that actually is very helpful. So the Stoics do that, I think, particularly well. And so Marcus Aurelius does it as well in meditations. So I think Stoicism is an important complement to what we've been doing, and kind of enables us to connect the dots between a lot of, and we had a very interesting discussion just the other night when we were talking about the Gospel of John, and the idea that when we think we know are in control of things that we're not in control of, just how damaging that actually is, not to us personally, but also on the idea that we think we understand what the right thing is all the time, and when that we have the answers, and that's not necessarily always the case. And so there's a sense of humility that exists in Stoicism, that also exists in the other works that we're discussing as well. There's a sense you're abandoning yourself from outcomes. So that's those are important concepts to understand. So I think making these connections and having this as a addition to our philosophy is very, very important moving forward.
Thank you, Joe. Great observations. I completely agree that actually this Seneca's work, these works really beautifully complement everything that we've been looking at. So the thing I think there is the beauty, or the original idea was to study these three things: Tao Te Ching, Bhagavad Gita, and Gospel of John in parallel, right? And the reason for that is that actually they're after the same thing. They're looking at the universal. I like to use the word Tao for that. So it's called Brahman in Bhagavad Gita. It's called God the Father in Gospel of John. But it is, reality, and it is what it is. And you don't really have a direct access to it. And it is something, these are universal principles that are shaping everything. All of them hold that. And then all of them hold that everything that we see comes from there. And we have a tendency on the top of that to forget that it came from there. We are fruits. We forget the root, and we forget the vine from where we came. And we just regard ourselves as 10,000 things and focus on other 10,000 things. We get attached to things. This is all kind of shifting the language from Gospel of John to Tao Te Ching and to Gita. And that condition is, again, the same condition that Seneca is talking about. that you have something in you which is true, and you get attached to all these externals, and you have to separate out. This dichotomy of control is all about separating out things that are the 10,000 things from that thou in you that you're focused on, which is, that's what sage is. That's what sage does in Tao Te Ching. That's what Atma is. That is what, Holy Spirit is in Gospel of John. So there is that commonality between them, but there is also differences, which actually lets you appreciate the depth and how little we understand this entire dance. Thou approaches it, that's the Chinese culture. It's a different sensibility. The Indian sensibility is different. In Gospel of John, we have got a combination of the Semitic sensibility, which comes from the Old Testament, and we've got the Greek sensibility, John being Greek. So we got now two in that. And what we're getting here with Seneca is the Roman sensibility, which is actually quite different from the Greek sensibility. It is far more practical oriented, but you can see the same structure. The beautiful thing about this differences in sensibility is that each of them emphasize different things. Each of them is better at describing some things and worse at describing some things. And when you do this and this and this and this, you have a much more richer picture of what is going on. Just like when you do intersection, what is common to each of them, you find there is a common core to them. When you do a AND operation, and when you add up and incorporate all these multiple perspectives, these different sensibilities, and they're sensibilities. It's not about just ideas. It is how the consciousness at that time functioned amongst the Chinese, amongst the Indians, amongst the Greeks, amongst the Semitic people, and amongst the Romans. And all of these put together, they are from this axial age. And that sensibility is very different from the modern sensibility. And by giving you this firsthand contact with such a varied versions of the same sensibility, this is an axial sensibility at a very high level. It allows you to say, okay, there is a different way of functioning, which was much more integrated than what we have today. And hopefully some of us will be able to cross over and incorporate a little bit more of that into our lives. All right, next up is going to be Oscar, Connie, and Penny. Oscar.
Yes. All right, hopefully I could do this quickly. But all right, so what I'm getting from Stoicism is basically a framework on how to deal with the outside world, that outside of you, which is basically, you have no control things that happen outside. The only thing you do have control over is yourself and your actions. And you should be more focused on you, specifically speaking, performing something that brings you joy, which to me is your passion, giving good service. I think also Stoicism, it kind of touches a little bit of the inner you, and this is where the Bible kind of fills that in. It goes more in depth. So yes, I will have to agree with Joe. It kind of complements each other. So yes, Stoicism is more outside of you and a little bit of in, and the Bible is it's more of both, but it also confirms. So yes, I'll leave it there.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Oscar. So let's elaborate on this point about, I'm going to focus on the New Testament and Stoicism. This thing about external and internal, and the dichotomy there, that is the cross. That is the cross, because externals, everything that you're attached to is your cross, is the thing that you're attached to, say, things that you're carrying with you. That is your old man, you know, and what you have control over is your new man, you know, and that is there that you live with at every point of time. And both, you're carrying both of them with you all the time. So this dichotomy of control is active in you. The old man, the old you, is a creature of habit. It has that mimetic desire, you know, it has the mimetic contagion, that all of this, which Rene Girard talks about. It is imitative. It wants what other people want. It is circular, and it's very easy to, you know, in parlance of Bhagavad Gita, it is the Raja gun that keeps going round and round, frenetically, never being satisfied. And that's the cross. And that is the external, attachment to the external. And what the New Testament is saying is that that is slavery. You know, what the cross does, what Jesus does on the cross is redemptive liberation. He basically says, you don't need to be a slave to everything external, even what you have done in the past, and gives you the freedom to do the right thing now, to focus on the truth now. That's the heart of it. Yes, Oscar, please go ahead.
Yes, this just came to mind, but so talking about Stoicism again, the external, which you was just referring to. I think Stoicism gives you like that. It gives you how to do it, but also why you should be doing it, right? Now, internal, this is where the Bible comes in, where it tells you how and why, where Stoicism really doesn't touch upon that, or if it does, it's only like briefly. So this is how they complement each other, again, what Joe was saying. But yes, that was pretty much it. Thank you.
Yes, wonderfully put. See, again, this is an example of how both of these things, you know, of these multiple perspectives help. So for example, Tao Te Ching achieves the same thing in almost a visual way. It gives you a feel, almost a kinesthetic feel of what it means to be living. So Bruce Lee's quote, be like water, my friend. You know, that is very much Taoistic way of thinking about it. What New Testament does is that it captures everything in the person of Jesus. So it's a person that you can emulate. In one of the letters of Seneca, he says, find a person that you think is good and emulate, because that external ideal. So it's basically what the New Testament does amazingly well, is that it puts forth the ideal. He's the word, he's love, and he's the right action. So thought, emotion, and action. And you know that you need to go in that direction. That's the way. So it's a very powerful combination. Now, and it's a very inspiring combination that engenders your love. It appeals to the heart directly. The Roman way of doing things rests on the Greek thought. So they are very elaborate in giving you reasons. It's showing you, look, you're wasting your life by this. Why are you letting your fears cut down the grandeur of your present being and present consciousness and present life? And they will do it in so many different ways, give you so many different reasons. So it is closer to the Jnana Yoga in Bhagavad Gita, whereas the Gospel of John is closer to the Bhakti Yoga, which is about devotion. But both of them actually are, as Bhagavad Gita holds, leading to the same thing, and they complement each other. So wonderful observations, Oscar. Really appreciate that. Next up is Connie, followed by Penny. Connie.
Yes, Shrikant, you just mesmerized me. So let me try to get back to what I was going to say. Thank you so much to Joe, who I've, been in this group for a while and loved and often had talked about Stoicism. So this is just wonderful. For some reason, this touches my heart in a different place than some of the other studies, which did not have any idea that it would. And I'm thinking letters. I love that each letter ends in farewell. I know this isn't deep, but it's just something about it is just so special. And I remember 100 years ago when I was young, and I read Lindbergh, his wife wrote a book, Stories. And I felt like I knew her when I ended the book. And it's kind of like reading a letter, these letters, being a personal part of it, it just brings something to me that is so special. And I'm so glad and appreciative that I have the honor of learning about Seneca through you, and just so glad and thankful to you for changing my life. Thank you. I'm very emotional tonight. Thank you.
Shrikant, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Connie. I do like the letter format, or more generally the conversation format of two people who actually care about each other, talking to each other. Like Bhagavad Gita has that comment, has that as a format. In some ways, all of Gospel of John is like that. Most of it is conversations with either one-on-one or in small groups. And that gives it, what it does is that it's really about, Gary, who does the Gospel of John with us, there is this concept that he uses all the time, which is access mundi, the place where the universal comes to earth. I think of it as Jacob's ladder. You have the top and you have the bottom right here, and you have angels moving up and down. That's what Jacob's ladder is. That's what access mundi is. That's what Jesus is. It's like, that's what Krishna is. That's what a sage is in Tao Te Ching. And that's what an ideal person is in Stoicism, because he embodies the universal principles and he's a body. So he is man and he's God. At the same time, he is eternal and he is ephemeral. At the same time, it is the idea of eternal now, or life according to eternal principles, or eternal life. But all of it is the key idea of having these things together. And each of these works, I mean, they're so incredibly beautiful and they're so deep, it's like every time I read this, I say, okay, I don't understand it, because every time I read it, I get more and more from each of them. And this is absolutely true of Seneca. It's like I'm going through these letters and I know there is so much more than what I can grasp. And you keep going through it in cycles, and because partly it's not just about saying, okay, this is what he's saying. It is about integrating that into your life, because that's all that really matters. Like, can you actually live this? Is this true? And are you living it? So it's that entire cycle. And I am just so grateful to everybody who's here, who's participating in this, because really, I find that it's impossible to learn about this on my own. And that's why I do these meetups, because each person brings their own life, their own understanding of things, and very generously shares what they understand. I think everybody here tries to be honest and put forth on the table whatever they understand and whatever questions they have. And I think that enables all of us to make progress on understanding these deep things. These deep things have been around for a long time, and it's very easy to misinterpret them in modern light, to get caught up in rituals of all kinds. And what this does, first, by having multiple of these works being studied and multiple of us engaging with them, communing with them in our own way and just sharing it with each other. So the conversation format that we have here is actually very similar to the things that we are seeing in the letters. We are actually writing letters on Zoom here, talking to each other on Zoom. And it has the same kind of quality to it, the human quality to it, the depth of thought, as much as we are able to muster, and the emotion with it, the everything in it. So I think, and Connie, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Next up is Penny.
Okay, well, I'm going to be very short. I just think that it's worthwhile. I could point out, like Connie had said too, that Joe has talked to us so much about Stoicism in the last couple of years. And, I read something in college philosophy, but nothing since. So, but I'm intrigued. I think if it's interesting to study what another set of great thinkers has thought about what it means to live a successful and fulfilling life. It's easy to read. It's interesting. Sometimes I wonder, it seems very timely, if it's the translation that has made it seem more modern, or they actually were saying things back then that sound like somebody could be saying them today. But I think it's a worthwhile course of study, and I've only made it about 2/3 of the way through Critical Path. I'm only about 4 or 5 pages, and then I'm like mind dead. So this is actually pretty good. I can read 10 letters at a time without like my brain falling apart. But
yes, absolutely. And I think that is the advantage of these people. It is further back. And the interesting thing is that it is further back. So some of these ideas have become part of our culture. We may not know that it has come from Stoicism, like the Serenity Prayer. That's really core of Stoicism. So they come to us, just like I'm finding with Bible, I just finished reading the Bible, and now that I'm reading other people, I say, oh, this is where it is coming from. I look at something in the culture and say, oh, this is where it is coming from. So in a sense, we are carrying some of these ideas within us. And we are carrying something which is opposite of that as well, in modern times. So it allows us to kind of separate. It also allows us to get a perspective on ourselves, because he's giving some examples which are on the surface very different than ours, but we can immediately see in ourselves, oh, this is this form of the same thing that he's talking about. So in that sense, it is very modern. Also the way in which the Roman culture especially is closer to American culture. The Northern European or American culture, it is very practical, so it speaks far more directly to us than let's say the Chinese culture or the Indian culture. So it is far more accessible and it is very deep. So excellent points. Thank you. Nalini, what do you think?
I'm sorry. I love the format. It gives, like you said, everyone to express what they feel or the questions, because as I have said, of course, many times, I'm new to the group, but it is, again, an amazing group. And I didn't know much about Seneca at all. So for me, it is all new, but I feel it's like the letters are written for, it feels sometimes they're written for me. And I think that makes a very big difference, because when you're reading the letter and you're reading these sentences and you think about yourself in that situation, and about death, about everyday life, about love, it has touched me tremendously. And thank you, Joe, you, Avanique, and everyone else who participates in it, because each one of you teach me something that I don't really know. So thank you. Thank you so much. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Nalini, what I was saying was that you may not realize it, but you probably teach us more than what you're learning. Really appreciate that, because ultimately it is in our characters. That's what it really matters, what we have in our characters, because that's the end result of all of this thinking. It is not about being able to speak well. It is not about that. It is actually about living true lives, living according to truth. And to the extent to which anybody does it, like you do, it has a tremendous impact on people. So thank you very much. It's an honor to have you here. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, no. I don't know what to say, but I just say what comes to my mind. I don't, think about it. It's just whatever comes to my mind or my heart, I should say.
Absolutely.
Sometimes, yeah, and sometimes, I'm sorry, sometimes I feel that it doesn't really even belong in this session, what I'm saying, but I just say it. So if I do that, I apologize for that.
No, I mean, I'm sorry, but I have to disagree with you here. I think you're always on point, because it's a question of, different people function differently. Some people have like an intuitive grasp of what needs to be said when, and they say it. So it's like, it is an automatic thing to them, but that is going through this entire lifetime of you having lived a certain way. And those words and those expressions come from that. So though it may seem to you, oh, I'm just reacting to it, because what you have done, what you are, those reactions can be really valuable, though you may not realize it. Okay, so thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
All right. Okay, folks. This has been amazing evening, and would love to, we're going to continue this. I'm going to do this as fast. I'm going to do as many of these meetups. Currently, we're trying to find a weekly spot for it, and we're probably going to have like a Tuesday evening after Confucius starts. Confucius would be like 7 to 9, and we will do this from 9 to 11 or something like that. That's the plan, because I want to move this fast. Meanwhile, I'll find whatever spots are there, and we'll keep doing as many of these meetups. All right. Okay. So thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.